Welcome back. So, would the suffering of the Syrian people be helped if the outside world gave military help to the rebels? That's the question we'll be debating in a moment. First, though, let's hear the views of the former Foreign Secretary David Miliband. When I spoke to him earlier today, I also talked to him about this and asked him what kind of intervention he thought should take place in Syria.
I mean, my fear is that all that we anticipated would happen in the event of Western intervention, refugees, state collapse, ramifications across the Sunni-Shia divide in the Middle East, all those things are happening with Western non-intervention. I mean, the irony is the West are the only people not intervening in the Syria conflict. The Russians are there, the Iranians are there, the Saudis are there, the Qataris are there. And so there's a very big choice to be made. I'm afraid it's not about small arms, because in the end, Syria is awash with small arms. There's a much bigger choice that the US, Britain, others have to address. I think the Prime Minister's instinct is that you need to do something big, not small, but he's obviously feeling very, very constrained at the moment.
What do you mean by big? I mean, do you mean missiles and
no, I don't think it's about missiles. But look, 18 months ago, the Turks put on the table no-fly zone, and since then the Syrian Air Force has been bombing its own people. And so it seems to me, as an outsider who doesn't have access to the military dossiers or to the intelligence anymore, that if there is to be Western intervention, it needs to be one that shifts the balance of power. Because my real fear is that non-intervention means this Assad regime is going to go on killing people for 2 or 3 years, more. And all that we fear about the collapse of the country, even if the opposition eventually inherit, is going to be there, and Syria will dissolve in front of our eyes. And if the state structure of the heart of the Middle East collapses, my God, we're going to be dealing with the consequences for a long time to come.
But to what extent are we hamstrung by the Iraq legacy?
I think Iraq is part of it, definitely. And there is a due humility, because more has gone wrong as a result of the Iraq intervention than has gone right. But if a consequence is that we end up with more Bosnias, then we can't be learning the right lessons.
David Miliband speaking to me earlier. Well, in the studio now, the Conservative MP Brooks Newmark, who met President Assad in Syria last year. He supports the West giving military help to rebel forces. I'm also joined by two people who oppose arming the rebels, the Syrian writer and filmmaker Halla Diyab and the former advisor to Boris Yeltsin and a close observer of the Kremlin, Alexander Nekrassov. Brooks Newmark, what do you think the West should do? Why?
Well, the West needs to do 3 things. First of all, it needs to pursue and continue pursuing all diplomatic channels as much as possible. Number 2, there has to be a containment strategy. We need to do all we can to support the Lebanese and Jordanians with the refugee crisis that they're facing. And number 3, we have to address the balance of power issue. At the moment, it's a very asymmetrical war, with Bashar Assad being armed by the Russians.
So you would arm the rebels?
Yes, I would. Yes, I think at this stage, in order to bring Bashar to the negotiating table, which we need to do, we need to balance that out. In order to do that, we need to up the ante by arming some of the rebels, not all the rebels.
Halla Diyab.
And what is actually the difference between some of the rebels and not all the rebels? Who are the rebels in Syria? I mean, the complication and the challenge we have is actually the nature of the rebels, because we have the Free Syrian Army and we have Jabhat al-Nusra as a terrorist group of Al-Qaeda group, and we have other Islamist group who are fighting in Syria, not because they are trying to transfer Syria into a democratic free country, but they want to establish Islamic Khalifa, and because they're fighting, Bashar is allowing.
How are you going to keep the weapons away from them?
Correct. I think you're absolutely right. I think the opposition Free Syrian Army has about 1,000 different splinter groups, and you've got Jabhat al-Nusra. What we need is better intelligence on the ground to know who are the generals in the Free Syrian Army who we can trust not to defect, not to give their arms over.
Does it work like that?
No, but the second, there was a report
but the second thing is
in Telegraph saying that it's like 50 commanders of the Free Syrian armies have Islamist and conservative agenda towards the future of Syria. And I mean, look
that leaves about another 950 to deal with.
Let me bring in Alexander Nekrassov. As David Miliband makes clear, Russia is already effectively intervening in this crisis, isn't it?
You know, when I listened to David Miliband, I realized why he lost to his brother in that leadership election.
Let's not
no
go into
logic,
that now.
no common sense. First of all, the West has been helping to arm Syrian rebels from practically the word go. We knew of arms coming into Syria for many, many months and basically years now. The covert operation by the CIA in Syria, was ordered by President Obama.
But Russia is propping up Assad, isn't it? Is there no limit to Russia's support for Assad? Is there a point at which they would say no?
First of all, show me those weapons that are going from Russia to Syria at the moment. Secondly...
No, I'm not saying that. Just politically, Russia is supporting Assad, isn't it? And keeping him there.
So what?
So is there
You can't create a vacuum, you know, to allow everybody to start pulling the strings and so on. First, the important thing is this. Libya is an example of this Western stupidity. I'm sorry, I have to use this word. Libya is now providing arms to terrorists all over the region. Look where these arms are now, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Mali and in Algeria. So how can we talk about supplying arms to the rebels who don't know who they are?
Let me just get Halla to corroborate your claim.
Islamist groups in Syria, I mean, if they are actually effective military, what is their agenda? Will they leave Syria, like especially with the Arab fighters who are part of Jabhat al-Nusra? They actually have a political agenda, and that is the fear. If we get rid of Bashar, this is not the end of the story. We will end up with Islamist group who want to establish Islamic Khilafah in Syria and also export terrorism to other regions around Syria.
Yeah, there are two layers to this war. There are the Syrian people who are fighting for their lives. And just a second, before you interrupt, there are two wars going. There is the Syrian people trying to work in Syria's interest. There is Jabhat al-Nusra, who are foreign fighters who've come in from the outside, who have a broader objective, which is to take on Iran, and that is their objective. I think what we need to do is to be supporting as much as we can the Syrian people on two levels. First of all, with humanitarian aid, the refugee camps, which we are doing. The second thing we need to do is to start identifying which of the opposition leaders that we should be supporting more actively than just wringing our hands, pounding our chests, and watching the slaughter continue. If we do nothing, there will be another 100,000 people dead by this time next year.
Of the Syrian people, during this conflict, the Syrian people are the people who started these demonstrations. They are young people in Syria who really run into the streets and they really want freedom, they want democracy. Syrian citizen wants to live as any British or French citizen want to live. However, this revolution have been hijacked by many opposition groups, by many Islamist groups, and now we don't talk about Syrian people. Anybody talked about Syrian people? What really Syrian people want?
Alexander Nekrassov, what is the Russian solution to the bloodshed? I mean, Russia doesn't want the bloodshed to go on any more than anyone else.
Of course, and that's the hypocrisy of statements like, oh, Russia has blood of Syrian people on its hands and it doesn't want a solution.
What is the Russian solution?
It wants Assad to stay. Russia is saying it has to be a slow process. You can't just take out Assad and then leave this sort of power struggle going on. You have to find ways of a behind-the-scenes setup. You know, you have to arrange this. You cannot just now.
Do you mean
take
getting
him
Assad
out.
to step down?
Of course. And Russia was always saying it is not planning to keep him there. It is planning to avoid bloodshed.
How do you get him to enter into negotiation? He won't even enter negotiation. While you continue to supply him with arms...
You have no proof of that. I'm sorry.
Of course you do. Of course you do. You've got military advisors on the ground.
You have no proof.
You have military advisors on the ground giving advice.
You keep banging on about 70,000 dead Syrians.
Where else are they getting their arms from?
You know that they are dead on both.
Look, you've both made claims about the other side. You made an unsubstantiated comment about Western arms as well. So let's just park who's supplying arms.
Comments. I'm sorry. It's reports on all over the Western media.
Let's just park who's supplying arms where and talk about the principled point.
Okay, principal point is we need to have a negotiated end to this. That is the most important thing. The majority of Syrian people, if they could wave a magic wand...
So you want to negotiate an end too?
I do.
How do you think arming the rebels is going to help?
Because at the moment it is an asymmetrical war in which everything is on one side, Bashar Assad's side. He has the intelligence, which he's getting from Iran. He's getting the arms from Russia, and he is getting aid from Hezbollah, and he is getting aid from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on tactics. At the moment, he is fighting people with small arms and bullets.
But
unless we... Just a second. Of course it's true. Of course it's true.
No, it's not
unless we balance that to bring Bashar to the negotiating table, and I admit we do need to engage in a negotiated end to this, this will not end. The country as we know, called Syria today, will no longer exist in 12 months' time.
Halla Diyab, I mean, you said who's talking about the Syrian people. 10 years after Iraq, where does doing the right thing come into this? Is this a decision that has to be based on practicality and what is achievable, or is there a a moral dimension?
Actually, there is moral dimension. There is also the nature and the fabric of the Syrian society, because you're not like it in Libya, where you have the majority are Sunnis. In Syria, we have the Kurds, we have the Alawite, we have the Shia, we have Ismaili, and we have a lot of sects. I think that if there is no political, peaceful transition of power in Syria, we will end up into a very divided society, and we will have more problems between people, because the Alawite, who represents 5% of the Syrian people, they will lose power after Bashar, and then there will be more fights between the Sunni and the Alawite. Who will control that? What about the refugees? We have 1 million refugees on the border.
Just in the final seconds, literally one word each, do you think the West will end up arming the rebels?
I hope no.
Alexander
Nekrassov. It's going to cause a bloodbath if they start this.
And the answer is yes.
You believe it will happen? Thank you all very much indeed for your time tonight. Thank you for joining us.